Okay, once the bouncing stops. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to another Midrash Rabbah 2.0 with After's Heart Ministries. I'm Rabbi Q. Today, my assistant will not be with me. And as is last week, where I had a little bit of sinus issues, one of the things that you guys get during the live is raw videos. So there'll be times where I may need to mute and clear my throat or whatever. But I will try to do my best to give you some quality stuff here. Today, we are talking about Chayei, and truth be told is I debated on whether or not to even do this Midrash. And one of the reasons why is because I haven't been feeling well this week. And sometimes I try to take that as a sign that I need to kind of step back and listen. However, Chayei Sarah is so full of little special things that it is one of those ones where if you're going to do a midrash, that's the one that you should do. Now, having said that, let me explain. When you are dealing with the Torah portions, there is a very powerful element built into the Torah portions, and that is that they were developed by Ezra, and they were developed at a time when they did not have codex. Now, let me explain a codex to you. Or I should say Kodai, I guess is how you would pronounce more than one. But they did not have the ability to make pages and sew them together. What they still had was scrolls. Now, the reason this is important is because when you are working with a scroll, they get so fat. They're like this fat, right? If it's a smaller one, and this fat if they're a bigger one. You can't just roll. Like if I was like, hey, let's go to Deuteronomy, you'd be an hour rolling the scroll. So what we call that is what has been is what was, right? And what is going to be is not yet. And what I mean by that is that we won't enter into a time before its season, or we won't enter into a season before its time, sorry. Now, what that means, and this is important, is that we are going to basically be connecting to whatever is in front of us. And so it's not like next week I could say, okay, let's go make up Chayei Sarah, because the Torah scroll will have already moved, right? It will have already turned. Okay, so the reason why that's so important then is within the context of our discussion, we're going to work through this one. I'm going to go ahead and read through it. It's a very short parasha, and then we're going to discuss some things. And if there's any questions in the Midrash section of our Slack network, then we will look at those. But also, basically, we are going to just kind of discuss the little special things that are in the English, but then also we're going to jump a little bit into the Hebrew later on. I'm not quite sure how long we're going to do the Midrash today. That's going to depend a lot on how much I cough or how much I'm not able to speak. So far, so good, though. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I am going to have to share the and I'm sorry for the bouncing. This particular stand is so wiggly. I'm going to go ahead and share the tablet, and then you will go ahead and take a look at the parasha. So we are actually going to be in Genesis chapter 23, verse 1 is where we'll start this. And from time to time, I might pull this up and show it, but generally speaking, I think we're going to do okay. And let's go ahead and use the Young's or I actually just do the NLT, and if we need to use the Youngs, we will. Okay, so when Sarah was 27 years old, I'm sorry, 127 years old, she died at Kiryat Arba, now called Hebron, in the land of Canaan, where Avram mourned and wept for her. Then, leaving her body, he said to the Hittite elders, "Here I am, a stranger and a foreigner among you. Please sell me a piece of land so I can give my wife a proper burial." The Hittites replied to Abraham, "Listen, my lord, you are an honored prince among us. Choose the finest of our tombs and bury her there. No one here will refuse to help you in this way." Then Abraham bowed low before the Hittites and said, "Since you are willing to help me in this way, be so kind as to ask Ephron, son of Zohar, to let me buy this cave at Machpelah, down at the end of his field. I will pay the full price in the presence of witnesses, so I will have a permanent burial place for my family." Ephraim was sitting there among the elders, and he answered Abraham, as the others listened, speaking publicly before all the Hittite elders of the town. I'm sorry, answered Abraham. So, no, my lord, he said to Abraham, please listen to me. I will give you the field and the cave. Here, in the presence of my people, I will give it to you. Go and bury your dead. Abraham again bowed low before the citizens of the land, and he replied to Ephron as everyone listened, "No, listen to me. I will buy it from you. Let me pay the full price for the fields so I can bury my dead there." Ephraim answered, "My lord, please listen to me. The land is worth 400 pieces of silver. But what is that between friends? Go ahead and bury your dead." So Abraham agreed to Ephron's price and paid the amount he had suggested, 400 pieces of silver, weighed according to the market standard. The Hittite elders witnessed the transaction. So Abraham bought the plot of land belonging to Ephron in Machpelah near Mamre. This included the field itself, the cave that was in it, and all the surrounding trees. It was transferred to Abraham as his permanent possession in the presence of the Hittite elders at the city gate. When Abraham buried his wife Sarah there in Canaan, the cave of Machpelah, near Mamre, also called Hebron, so the field of the cave were transferred from the Hittites to Abraham for use as a permanent burial place. Okay, so what I usually do if I read in a midrash is I will stop at each chapter and see if there's any comments that anybody wants to make. So I have about 6 people in the Zoom meeting with me. And so I am definitely welcoming any comments or questions at this point concerning this part of the story. If we don't have anything, I will move on because I will make my comments and ask questions later on. Give an opportunity for people to unmute. Okay, so if you do have a question come up in your mind or your heart, for those of you in the congregation who are following along, you can post it in Slack, or you can actually, if you need to, you can actually unmute and interrupt me. Okay, so then we'll move on to chapter 24. Abraham was now a very old man, and Yahweh had blessed him in every way. One day, Abraham said to his oldest servant, the man in charge of his household, "Take an oath by putting your hand under my thigh. Swear by Yahweh, the Elohim of heaven and earth, that you will not allow my son to marry one of these local Canaanite women. Go instead to my homeland, to my relatives, and find a wife there for my son Isaac." The servant asked, "But what if I can't find a young woman who is willing to travel so far from home? Should I then take Isaac there to live among your relatives in the land you came from?" No, Abraham responded, be careful never to take my son there. For Yahweh, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house in my native land, solemnly promised to give this land to my descendants. He will send his angel ahead of you, and he will see to it that you find a wife there for my son. If she is willing to come back with you, then you are free from this oath of mine. But under no circumstances are you to take my son there. So the servant took an oath by putting his hand under the thigh of his master, Abraham. He swore to follow Abraham's instructions. Then he loaded 10 of Abraham's camels with all kinds of expensive gifts from his master, and he traveled to distant Aram Naharaim. There he went to the town where Abraham's brother Nahor had settled. He made the camels kneel beside a well just outside the town. It was evening, and the women were coming out to draw water. Yahweh, God of my master Abraham, he prayed, give me a success today and show unfailing love to my master Abraham. See, I am standing here beside this spring, and the young women of the town are coming out to draw water. This is my request. I will ask of them. Please give me drink from your jug. If she says yes, have a drink, and I will water your camels too. Let her be the one you have selected as Isaac's wife. This is how I will know that you have shown unfailing love to my master. Before he had finished praying, he saw a young woman named Rebekah coming out with her water jug on her shoulder. She was the daughter of Bethuel, who was the son of Abraham's brother Nahor and his wife Milcah. Rebekah was very beautiful and old enough to be married, but she was still a virgin. And she went to the spring, filled her jug, and came up again. Running over to her, the servant said, please give me a little drink of water from your jug. Yes, my lord, she answered, have a drink. And she quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and gave him a drink. When she had given him a drink, she said, I'll draw water for your camels too, until they have had enough to drink. So she quickly emptied her jug into the watering trough and ran back to the well to draw water for all his camels. The servant watched her in silence, wondering whether or not Yahweh had given him success in his mission. Then at last, when the camels had finished drinking, he took out a gold ring for her nose and 2 large gold bracelets for her wrists. Whose daughter are you? He asked. And please tell me, would your father have any room to put us up for the night? I am the daughter of Bethuel, she replied. My grandparents are Nahor and Milcah. Yes, we have plenty of straw and feed for the camels. We have room for guests. The man bowed low and worshipped Yahweh. Praise Yahweh, the Elohim of my master, Avraham. He said, Yahweh has shown unfailing love and faithfulness to my master, for he has led me straight to my master's relatives. The young woman ran home to her family to tell her family everything that had happened. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban who ran out to meet the man at the spring. He had seen the nose ring and bracelets on his sister's wrists and had heard Rebekah tell what the man had said, so he rushed out to the spring where the man was still standing beside his camels. Laban said to him, come and stay with us, you who are blessed by Yahweh. Why are you standing here outside the town when I have room all ready for you and a place prepared for the camels? So the man went home with Laban. Laban unloaded the camels, gave him straw for their bedding, fed them, and provided water for the man and the camel drivers to wash their feet. Then food was served, but Abraham's servant said, I don't want to eat until I have told you why I've come. All right, Laban said, tell us. I am Abraham's servant, he explained, and Yahweh has greatly blessed my master. He has become a wealthy man. Yahweh has given him flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, a fortune in silver and gold, many male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. When Sarah, my master's wife, was old, she gave birth to my master's son, and my master has given him everything he owns. And my master made me take an oath, saying, do not allow my son to marry one of these local Canaanite women. Go instead to my father's house, to my relatives, and find a wife there for my son. But I said to my master, what if I can't find a young woman who is willing to go back with me? He responded, Yahweh, in whose presence I have lived, will send his angel with you, and will make your mission successful. Yes, you must find a wife for my son among my relatives from my father's family. Then you will have fulfilled your obligation. But if you go to my relatives and they refuse to let her with you, go with you, you will be free from my oath. So today, when I came to the spring, I prayed this prayer: O Yahweh, my God of my master Abraham, please give me success on this mission. See, I am standing here beside this spring. This is my request. When a young woman comes to draw water, I will say to her, please give me a little drink of water from your jug. If she says, yes, I have a drink, and I will draw water for your camels too, let her be the one you have selected to be the wife of my master. Before I had finished praying in my heart, I saw Rebecca come out with her water jug on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew water. So I said to her, give me drink. She quickly lowered her jug from her shoulder and said, yes, I have drink. I will water your camels too. So I drank, and she watered the camels. Then I asked, whose daughter are you? She replied, I am the daughter of Bethuel, and my grandparents are Nahor and Milcah. So I put the ring on her nose and bracelets on her wrists. Then I bowed low and worshiped Yahweh and praised Yahweh, the God, the Elohim of my master, Abraham, because he had led me straight to my master's niece to be his son's wife. So tell me, will you or won't you show unfailing love and unfaithfulness to my master? Please tell me yes or no, and then I'll know what to do next. Lavan and Bethuel replied, Yahweh has obviously brought you here, so there is nothing we can say. Here is Rebecca. Take her and go. Yes, let her be the wife of your master's son, as Yahweh has directed. Then Avram's servant heard their answer. He bowed down to the ground and worshipped Yahweh. Then he brought out silver and gold jewelry and clothing and presented them to Rebecca. He also gave expensive presents to her brother and mother. Then they ate their meal, and the servant and the men with him stayed overnight. But early the next morning, Avram's servant said, send me back to my master, but we want Rebecca to stay with us at least 10 days. Her brother and mother said, then she can go. But he said, don't delay me. Yahweh has made my mission successful. Now send me back so I can return to my master. Well, they said, we'll call Rebecca and ask her what she thinks. So they called Rebecca. Are you willing to go with this man? They asked her. She replied, yes, I will go. So they said goodbye to Rebecca and sent her away with Abraham's servant and his men. The women who had been Rebecca's childhood nurse went along with her. They gave her this blessing as she parted. Our sister, may you become the mother of many millions. May your descendants be strong and conquer the cities of their enemies. Then Rebecca and her servant girls mounted the camels and followed the man. So Abraham's servant took Rebecca and went on his way. Meanwhile, Isaac, whose home was in the Negev, had returned from Beer Lahai Roy. One evening, as he was walking and meditating in the fields, he looked up and saw the camels coming. When Rebecca looked up and saw Isaac, she quickly dismounted from her camel. Who is that man walking through the fields to meet us? She asked the servant, and he replied, it is my master. So Rebecca covered her face with her veil. Then the servant told Isaac everything he had done, and Isaac brought Rebecca into his mother's tent, and she became his wife. He loved her deeply, and she was a special comfort to him after the death of his mother. Okay. So we'll go ahead and take opportunity, since that's the end of the chapter, to give somebody, if they want to ask any questions. For those of you who are in Slack, go ahead and unmute. I will check YouTube real quick here because I actually don't have YouTube Studio loaded on here. Oh, actually, I don't have YouTube on here at all. Okay, well, let me check it here. Sorry for the bounce, y'all. Okay, I don't see any questions here in the chat, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that we are probably good to go for this chapter. All right. Go back and share my screen. Okay. All right. Abraham married another wife whose name was Keturah. She gave birth to Zimran, Jokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. Dedan's descendants were Asherites, Lutishites, and the Leumites. Midian's sons were Ephah, Epher, Chanach, uh, Abida, and Eldaah. These were the descendants of Abraham through Keturah. Abraham gave everything he owned to his son Isaac. But before he died, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them off to a land in the east away from Isaac. Abraham lived 175 years, and he died at a ripe old age, having lived a long and satisfying life. He breathed his last and joined his ancestors in death. His sons Isaac, Ishmael, buried him in the cave. Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite. This was the field Abraham had purchased from the Hittites where he had buried his wife Sarah. After Avram's death, God blessed his son Isaac. I'm sorry, Abraham's death. God blessed his son Isaac, who settled near Bir Lahai Roi in the Negev. This is the account of the family of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, through Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian servant. Here is a list by their names and clans of Ishmael's descendants. The oldest was Nebaot, followed by Kedar, Abiel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jeter, Nafish, Kedma. These 12 sons of Ishmael became the founders of the 12 tribes named after them, listed according to the places they settled and camped. Ishmael lived for 137 years. Then he breathed his last and joined his ancestors in death. Ishmael's descendants occupied the region from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt in the direction of Ashur. There they lived in open hostility toward all their relatives. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stop there for a minute. We'll go ahead and see if there's any questions from the those who are in the Zoom meeting with me. And then after that, we're going to check the YouTube. Then after that, we're going to take a little bitty break, and then I am going to start working through this parasha. And it's not always that I'm going to read through a parasha, but this is one of those parashas where when you're reading through it, you'll see that there are things that don't make sense. And I think that is a very important thing. So at any rate, we're going to go ahead and nobody's unmuting in the congregation. So we are going to check the YouTube. And I don't have any questions there. So we will go ahead and take a brief break, just real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll start working through this. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. In verse 1 of chapter 23, where it says, when Sarah died, she was 27 years old. Now, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the Young's literal translation and read this to you. I'm not going to share it, but this is how it reads. And the life of Sarah is 127 years, the years of the life of Sarah. Okay. So now there's a couple things that are very important here. First of all, it doesn't say the death of Sarah. Okay. So a general Midrash question that comes up in almost every discussion, which we'll go ahead and generally address today, is the question: if this drasha is called Chayei Sarah, or the life of Sarah, why does it not tell us anything about Sarah except that she died and how old she was when she died? Well, number one, there is a whole bunch of information involved in that question. Okay. So the first and most important piece of that question is, why does this talk about the life of Sarah when there is just her death and her age, right? Okay. So first thing on the list in that is her age. There is actually no other woman in all of the Bible whose actual age is recorded. Not one. Okay. So the question is if that's true, why did Torah single her out? I will leave that just for a moment to see whether or not that comes up on YouTube or if it comes up in the congregation. If anybody wants to try to answer that question or to address that question. Why is Sarah the only one? What did she do to merit being recorded in Torah as having lived 127 years?
She was past childbearing years, most
She was
likely.
past child. Okay, so part of it had to do maybe like with the promise. Is that what you're thinking, Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, so she was proof of the covenant. Okay. All right. Are there any other places where we have that number or something near that number mentioning the life of anyone? So we do have Ishmael, right, who's 137 when he dies. And we can see why that is because Abraham was what, in his 80, he was like 89 when he gave birth to Ishmael. And so we can see that Ishmael actually dies at the same time as Sarah. What do you guys think about that? Wait, no. Ishmael, so Sarah was 88. Okay, I'm wrong about that. I'm thinking of something else. Anyways, so we have a 10-year difference, but we do have the 100 years in there, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But the premise is that that's the only thing that's mentioned. But there's another place in Torah thus far that has mentioned something similar to 127 years. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? I'm going to go ahead and check the YouTube channel real quick here. Nothing so far. Okay. And let me check the Midrash questions really quick here. Again, since I'm kind of operating solo, I have to double check everything here. Okay. So the other place where this is mentioned is at the time of the flood, where Yahweh declares, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever." 120 years he has been given. Okay. So the question is that a limitation placed upon the aging of man, right? That would be my question. And if true, then why another 7 years for Sarah and how many more for Abraham? I can't remember. Let me check here real quick. Anybody want to unmute and answer that? Just let me look at this real quick here. And it's Abraham's death is actually in chapter 25. I was looking at Abraham's years really quick. It was 175. Okay, so some sources, including Torah, which we will obviously grant Torah its honor, and I shouldn't say grant, we will give to Torah its honor as truth, as the only word of God, because it was spoken mouth to Moses. But also we will accept that other sources say he was younger when he left Haran. And some have even accepted that the 75 years old was actually how old he was when he left Haran, but 50 years old is when he actually left to go to the promised land from Ur of the Chaldeans. Either way, however it works out, 50 years old is the youngest that legend has it that he is. So we could almost say he spent 100 years or more potentially in this promised land with covenant with Yahweh, and he got 75 years with Isaac, right? Which is pretty amazing. Okay. So anyways, the reason why I bring this up is because basically we should try to midrash why Sarah gets 7 more years on the 120 that Yahweh granted to mankind, and why Abraham got 75 more years, no, 50 more years than the rest, right? So here's a question that I have for you guys concerning this. And what it has to do with is this concept that Sarah's life is mentioned, but the only thing in this chapter, the only thing in this parasha is her death. Does anybody want to comment on that at all? So we talked a little bit about the age, but I want to talk a minute about the I want to talk a minute about the rest. I want to see if anybody would like to unmute and say why they think the first thing that happens in this story about the life of Sarah is she dies. Does anybody have any theories?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Could it be that it your life is not necessarily about what happens to you, but the um lineage that you leave behind?
Mhm. Mhm.
What the next generation is about?
Mhm. Okay. Um, that's an interesting thought. So basically, your life is never really about you, but about the legacy that you leave. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So that's an interesting thought. And I can tell you there is definitely some merit for that thought. So there is no right or wrong answer here. And so all of this input is actually really good, right? So Cindy says, well, she lived to 127 years because that shows that she actually got to experience the promise, right? So let's go back to chapter 17 really quick and take a look at the actual covenant that is made with Abraham concerning Isaac. Okay, it's in chapter 17. In fact, I will just go ahead and share it with you guys because I think it's important enough. We need to go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, so basically, in chapter 17, uh, in verse 15, it says, "And Elohim saith unto Abraham, Sarai, thy wife, thou dost not call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name." So she loses the yod and gains the hay, which we could talk about at another time. "And I have blessed her, and I have also given to thee a son from her, and I have blessed her, and she hath become nations, kings of peoples are from her. And Abraham falleth on his face and laugheth and saith in his heart, to the son of 100 years old is one born, or doth Sarah, daughter of 99 years, bear? And Abraham saith unto God, oh, that Ishmael may live before thee. And Elohim saith, Sarah, thy wife, is certainly bearing a son to thee, and thou hast called his name Itzhak. And I have established my covenant with him for a covenant age enduring to his seed after him. As to Ishmael, I have heard thee. Lo, I have blessed him and made him fruitful and multiplied him very exceedingly. 12 princes doth he beget, and I have made him become a great nation. And my covenant I establish with Isaac, whom Sarah doth bear to thee at this appointed time next year. Okay, so a couple things that we need to get into here. All right. So the first one is last week in the last parasha, we discussed that it was pretty significant that Sarah was actually the focal point of Yahweh's compassion and of Yahweh's promise. Abraham had the promised seed, Ishmael, through Hagar. And Hagar was his wife, so she was a free woman, and Ishmael was a free boy. Okay, he was a free son. So there was no reason whatsoever, according to Torah, that Sarah needed to be involved unless Yahweh had some special thing figured out for Sarah. Now, I want to go back to the story of Abimelech, which we did not discuss in any of our Midrash within the past 3 weeks. However, Abimelech has something very unique happen to him in his experience with Abraham. Okay. So, first of all, Abraham moves to the Philistines, he moves to Gerar. Okay. And he lives there in Gerar because, again, his promised land is struck with a famine. Now, according to Ezekiel chapter 16 and Ezekiel chapter 12, it is Yahweh who brings the famine upon a land. And according to Chronicles, I believe it is, it might be Second Kings, but I'm pretty sure it's Chronicles, Second Chronicles. The land itself will also create a famine if it feels like the people of the land are not honoring Yahweh. So the land is very zealous for Yahweh, right? Okay, but it is very important for you to know that in all of that, that famine drives Abraham out of his land every time. Well, this time, instead of going down to Egypt, the land of the serpent, that's another story, he goes to the Philistines. He goes to the land of the god, the god of fish, right? So he goes to the land of Dagon. And in the land of Dagon, he basically does the same thing he did in Egypt, where he says, no, she's my sister. And so then, of course, Abimelech takes Sarah into his household. Well, immediately Yahweh comes to Abimelech in a dream and says, you're a dead man. And Abimelech's like, will you kill a righteous nation because of one man? And he goes, that woman is married. That woman is joined to a man. That is somebody's wife. So then after that, there is a releasing of Sarah and whatnot. But in all of that, Yahweh looks out for Sarah, right? Abraham does not look out for Sarah in Egypt. Abraham does not look out for Sarah in Gerar, but Yahweh does in both instances, right? So I want to just say something. There are those of you, and I know this is not my viewers, okay, but there are some, and some may watch this, but my usual viewers probably this doesn't apply to, think that Torah is misogynistic. And I am going to say that this is another case where Sarah, the woman, gets special treatment, gets remembered multiple times by the intensification of all power in the universe, stuffed into a perceivable entity that we could relate to and give homage to, et cetera, what all of humans need in order to deal with the fact that there's a God, right? Yahweh is. But the premise is that he takes upon himself a personal interest in Sarah, who apparently does not get to be involved in a lot of what's going on in Abraham's decisions, and B, definitely is not a woman who is irreverent of God like Rachel was, right? And when I say God, I mean like the Christian version of God. So and the weird reason I bring that up is because the concept here is that Sarah gets special treatment in Torah. I'm going to propose to you that that's because Torah cares more about the woman. I will give you an example. There is no law concerning a man if he is somehow seduced by a woman. There's all kinds of information about it in Proverbs, but there's no rules about how a woman can manipulate a man and get him in a position where he is going to be in trouble if he was to actually do something. There is a law concerning the protection of another man's wife. That's adultery. There is a law concerning the forcing of a woman. That is uh, that is an assault. There is a law concerning if a man seduces a woman. That is the laws concerning a virgin. You all need to get the concept here, okay? Because don't if you don't honor the fact that men are not protected by Torah, and you honor the fact that women on a constant basis are protected by Torah, including even the indentured servant who who falls in love with her master and marries her master, right? Even that person who basically is, uh, in some sort of debt, right? For whatever reason, maybe she's a widow, maybe her husband was in debt and he has gone off to war or something. Whatever the reason is that she ends up in his household and he ends up marrying her, she is protected with food, clothing, conjugal rights. And if he ever sends her away, she actually has protections. She's free. So I want you to think about this for a minute. The Torah says that if a woman is in debt and she marries her debtor, the debt is canceled. If a woman is in a field and she's seduced by a man, the man has to actually marry her. He has to take them. If you're going to lay down with the woman, then you are going to be in a marriage relationship with her. Now, there's an exception to that, which is a concubine, which we may or may not get into later on, because you notice concubines are mentioned at the end of this chapter. But it is very important for you to think about the idea here that Torah is actually a feminine energy. Okay? I'm going to stop for a minute and see if anybody would like to comment on that at all. Unmute and comment, and I will check YouTube to see whether or not anybody would like to comment here on YouTube, just to see what we've got going on. Otherwise, basically, we'll continue to the next part of this reality that we're about to get into here. Okay, so I have taken a moment to check YouTube. I do see something actually in the comments on YouTube, and I'll bring that up in just a moment. Let's go ahead and let's see, what do I want to do here? I think I'm going to just go ahead and okay, so there is actually a comment on YouTube. If Abraham is the father of all that believe, Sarah carried the seed of the, and that's all it says. Do you want to elaborate on that one, or do you want me to?
No, I didn't realize that I had pressed enter through that. But yes, it's the seed of the lineage.
The seed of the lineage. Okay. All right. Okay. Um, all right. So yeah, let me let's talk about that for a minute. So Yahweh shows special information concerning the feminine or the concerning the female in this story. But then we're about to see the same type of stuff happen with Rebecca. We're about to see the same type of stuff happen with Leah. We see it with Jezebel. We see it with Zipporah. We see all these special informational things going on throughout Torah with the female. Now, I know that there is there is a lot. There's a lot going on in the story with Abraham and Sarah, and we could spend months on it, but we are about to move into the next section of Torah, because we know that Torah is from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so we are going to encounter Isaac, we are going to encounter Jacob, we are going to encounter the 12 sons, right? Okay. So let me see if I can make this clear. An olive tree is, or an olive branch is a universal symbol for shalom, okay, for peace. It is in the United Nations symbol. It is used in a number of it's used in a number of symbols. The reason for that is because it takes 7 years for the good olives to grow on an olive tree. In fact, to my understanding, they will not even use olives for oil until the 7th year. And the function behind that whole system is a belief that if an olive comes to its full effectiveness or efficiency, then there's peace in the land. And I'm going to propose that that is an ancient Hebrew nomadic system of belief. And I'm going to propose to you that after Sarah passed the limitation granted to humanity through what happened before the flood, whatever happened before the flood caused humanity to not be able to age to the area that they normally would have been able to age. One of the things that we need to take into consideration is that Sarah was granted shalom before she died. Now, there's plenty of reasons. I mean, the word 7 itself is actually has nothing to do with counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but instead is about an oath. You 7 yourself, right? When you make an oath, you 7 yourself. You state it 7 times, okay? So we do see the word oath being used here in the story with the servant, right? And we do see the word oath being used when Abraham is when he's explaining it to Abraham's family in Haran, right? Okay, so when we identify that when we identify that Yahweh's covenant is actually with Sarah in chapter 17 and has nothing to do with Abraham, because what does Abraham say? Oh, that Ishmael would live before you. And that's after he bows his head and laughs, which is why Isaac is named Isaac, not because Sarah laughed, right? And so what do we glean from that? We glean that Yahweh gave 7 more years to Sarah with Isaac before Genesis chapter 22. Okay. So what does that mean? Would anybody like to comment on that? I want you to think about Genesis chapter 22. Okay. Genesis chapter 22, 2. Okay. Let it be ingrained in your brain. There's a reason why I skipped it last week, and I'll explain that in a minute. But let it be ingrained in your brain. Genesis chapter 22, 2. Take your only son Isaac and go to the place I will show you and sacrifice your son there. Slaughter your son there. Right? Kill your son. Right? What people don't realize is that this particular chapter 23, is after 22. And not only that, but Abraham is not present when Sarah dies. Sarah dies in Kiryat Arba. Abraham is where? Where's Abraham? So Sarah dies while Abraham is at Moriah. I want you to think about that for a minute. Sarah did not go with Abraham when Yahweh gave instruction to Abraham to take his son to Moriah. And I want you to understand something. All of the information that you need to understand about what happened with Abraham and his son is not contained in your Christian box. Okay? There's a reason why I left the incident with Isaac and Abraham and the ram out, because Christianity has shaped that into this pretty little box. Okay? And I truly just didn't want to get into it last week because there's a lot that Christianity does not understand about that incident. For example, there is some rabbinical commentary that says that he died, that Abraham did not stop when he had raised the knife. He had already begun the process. Raising the knife meant that he had begun the process, and that Isaac died and was resurrected. So there's a lot that we could get into with that, because it was Mount Moriah, and some people believe that Mount Moriah has resurrection power. Hint. But the premise is that in the grand scheme of things, what I really want to get in here is that Sarah seems to have not necessarily been everything that we think she was with Abraham. But for some reason, I mean, let's start at the beginning, where Haran dies and Sarah becomes Abraham's wife, probably through a Levirate covenant, right? Where you have not had children yourself, so you marry, or you're not married and you have not had children yourself, and she has not had children yet, so you marry, and then you raise up children in the name of that one, right? Now, granted, that doesn't happen. Isaac is raised in the name of Abraham, right? But truth be told is that Sarah is still the consideration. So people ask why, right? People ask why. But I'm about to show you something really interesting, and that is the word for Torah, the God's teaching and instruction, right? Coming from the root word Yod Resh, which is hand of man, and to cast the finger, right? To cast the finger, to give instruction, is a feminine noun. Torah is a very unique word, but rest assured, it is actually feminine. It has a hey as the final letter, Torah, right? And Torah is what? It is an extension of fear. It's an extension of the archery mark, right? Or shooting something straight. Torah is the ultimate goal, and Torah is feminine. Now, before you gender fluid people start getting worked up and excited, let me make something clear. Torah does not apologize for gender roles and does not make it does not make exception for gender fluidity. However, the actual Torah itself is a feminine energy, and its focus is on the feminine. Now, there's three things that are very important. I was wondering if my other finger was going to go up. There are three things that are very important about that. Number one, and this is very relevant, Torah as a feminine energy focuses on the woman, which means that the process of man is assumed. The masculine energy is assumed. Oh boy, if you really understood what that meant. Because I think men struggle with this fact that the masculine energy is assumed and the feminine energy is instructed. Because there are probably some presuppositions we could come up with concerning men that men aren't ready to accept. But what I want you to think about is the premise that the masculine energy of the intensification of all power in the universe is actually an outward in all directions, all vectors with the maximum amount of energy expression. There's a reason why a man can go and plant his seed in 7 women in one night, but only one woman can get pregnant once per night. The very special energy behind the feminine is not only time, but unity in the sense of oneness. One singular seed fertilizes the egg, and the egg chooses it. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because in this day and age, masculinity is emphasized or ostracized. In fact, the emasculation of men is the order of the day. But what people don't realize is that that may be true, but part of that is because the masculinity of men is no longer assumed. Because what men did is they took misogyny and made it such an emphasis that there needed to be a balance. And so now emasculation is the result. But what you don't realize is that the intensification of all power in the universe is a masculine energy, and his counterpart, the feminine, right, the nekavah, is a very different energy, and Torah is that energy. says a lot about the voice of a woman. It says a lot about the heart of a woman. It says a lot about the wisdom of a woman. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because if you can realize that those extra 7 years were a gift, and if you can realize that those were spent with Isaac before Yahweh asked for the sacrifice. I know that that word sacrifice is not appropriate, but it's how most people understand it. And so we'll just leave it like that for now. Okay. Oof, that was not good. Would anybody like to would anybody like to comment on that very thing that I'm stating right now? Would anybody like to say anything about that? Okay. Now, I want to get into the discussion about Isaac, but before I do, I want to just bring up something really quick. And that is that one of the reasons why Sarah's age is mentioned and no other woman gets that honor is because the serpent, and this is Midrash, right? This is Jewish folklore. The serpent was in unity with Eve, but Sarah refused that unity by calling Abraham her Lord and by continuing to make Abraham the authority and not the serpent. Let me explain. The word tree in the Hebrew, etz. Remember, we have the tree of life. Etz hachayim, tree of the life, or tree of life. Etz chayim. Then we have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Etz yada, or etz yadat ha tov ve'hara. Okay? So we have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What people don't know, and this is important, is that in ancient Hebrew understanding, you had three concrete witnesses by which every word was established. And remember, Hebrew is a verbal language. In other words, it is not a noun-based language. It is a language of action. Everything in Hebrew is an action, okay? So now you have an ancient Hebrew man come along and he looks at a tree, okay? And he says, wow, that thing is unmovable. Therefore, when I describe sound wisdom, I am going to refer to a tree. And what I mean by that is that the word etz itself is actually a figurative meaning and is not actually the description of the tree itself. I'm going to prove that to you. Okay. And if I had my whiteboard, which I don't, I'm not even at that location, I could draw this for you. But the premise is that basically what we've got going on here is that etz is a combination of an ayin, which we can get into, right? And a tzadi, which is a man laying on his side. Okay. So on the one side, we have the twisted rope. right? It's would be the twisted rope or the twisting of the man on his side. On the other side, we have the I, right? The ayin. And so the ayin received the sound of the name of the letter, but the ga gave the twisting of the letter. So that's why the ayin looks twisted, right? So the ayin looks somewhat like this. There we go, like this, right? As if it's a twisting. The reason this is important is because the word for counsel in Hebrew is etzah. So let me explain to you this. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is actually can double as the counsel of the knowledge of good and evil. And the tree of life can double as the counsel of life. I'm going to prove it to you. I will show you right here. Okay. Here we go. We're going to jump into this. I need the Blue Letter Bible. There we go. Okay. So Psalm chapter 1.
No sound.
Sorry about that. We had a phone call come through. Okay. So what I want to show you is this place where we have the happiness of that one. Let's go ahead and change that over to the NLT. Oh, the joys of those who do not follow the advice of the wicked. But let's go look in the Hebrew. Okay. So Ashrei is generally blessed or happy, right? Is the man, right? Which not walks in what? In the counsel. Let's go look. Counsel, okay? Which it comes from the root word ya'atz, to advise or consult. But if we go into the Strong's Concordance number 3289 and we jump over to the let's see, where is, oh, you know what, I don't actually have it here on this one, on this particular tablet, so we can't jump over to it here, so I'll have to do it on this bouncy thing over here. Give me a second. Okay, so first let's jump over to Psalms chapter 1. Okay, jumping into the Hebrew and going to our Strong's Concordance number. And we'll just use this one. Okay. And then jumping into our Ancient Hebrew Lexicon of the Bible. We'll go over here. Okay. And then we can jump over to that right there. See that PR says parent root, right? And so the concrete is a tree. The action is counsel. And the abstract is abundance, meaning what? Hebrew is a action language. It's a drawing of a tree, but the actual action language is counsel. Okay? So the way I want you to think about this is if Hebrew is an action language, then it is nothing to do with the tree. That means there isn't actually necessarily a tree in the garden as much as there is counsel in the garden. Now, where does that become important? Where is that actually a relevant thing? Okay. I want to ask your opinion about that. I want to see if you can make the connection that I'm looking for. So go ahead and unmute. I will check YouTube, see if anybody brings up the question or makes a comment there, and tell me what you think is being gotten at here. Okay. Anybody want to take a shot at it?
Well, I'm thinking of when Yeshua put the mud on the eyes of the person, and he said to him, he said, "What do you see?" Say, "I see men as trees." So I believe it's a man. I believe it's a human.
Okay. And so we could look at it two different ways, couldn't we? We could look at it as the twisted, kind of rooted knotting of a tree, right? With the twisted rope on the one side, which would be kind of the twisting of the torso of a man laying on his side. So it kind of makes sense. That's a trunk, right? So you could see how they or why they drew it that way. Or we can look from the point of view of the eye viewing or watching over somebody who's laying down, because laying down is a vulnerable position. An eye watching over that person would be in a state of being able to give advice or protect them, right? And so we can see where this ancient pictograph actually is not indicative of a tree per se. Now, what's interesting about this is when you go into the ancient Hebrew lexicon of the Bible, we do get a glimpse, right? We don't get a pictographic definition, right? Right there. There's no pictographic definition, but we do get a nomadic definition, the upright and firmness of a tree. And the first word, eitz, means to be upright and firm. Now look at what it says. The elders of the tribe were upright and firm ones, making decisions and giving advice. And so what's interesting is we actually start to get into the elderness of the tribe. Now, where that really, really becomes important is in the story about Laban and Bethuel, or Bethuel, which we will get into. However, what's interesting is if we accept that the fruit, now this is another thing that we necessarily need to get into, and that is the word fruit. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get into this. Let's take a look at this. So what we'll do is we'll go to the first usage of the word fruit, which is in Genesis chapter 1. And again, I apologize that I'm using the bouncy one, but we need to be able to use the lexicon. So bear with me. All right. So going to Genesis chapter 1, and we're looking at day 3, right? Where there is this fruit, right? Bringing forth seed, right? Right here, yields fruit. So if we go into the Hebrew, we'll find that here's the word fruit, peri, right? Peri. From the root word para, to bear fruit, right? Or to branch off. But when we go into the ancient Hebrew, we have another mystery. And that mystery is what the word fruit is spelled as in the parent root. Because again, and this is important, these ancient peoples had this deep mystical wisdom that people overlook, thinking that they were just ignorant stone age, dwellers or whatever. But here's the word fruit, okay? Here's the parent root. We'll go ahead and highlight that just so we know that we've been here before. Look at the all the concrete. I mean, talk about ridiculous. Look how many concretes there are. So what is the actual legit original one? Right? It is, let me go ahead and get rid of that. It's not going to let me unhighlight it. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. You'll notice that it is tread, burst, break, tear, spread, split, flee, cast, divide. Okay. One of the things I can't stand about the electronic version of this lexicon is that he went ahead and put all the different stems as the concrete, right? But let's look at this. The pictograph pe is a picture of an open mouth, and the resh is a picture of the head. Combine these mean open the head. Now, let's look at the ancient nomadic definition here, right? Ancient nomadic definition, we'll put it in blue. And it continues actually in the next page. The heads of grain are scattered on the threshing floor, a smooth and hard level surface. An ox is led around the floor, crushing the heads, opening them to reveal the seed inside. Also, the fruit of trees that are harvested, right? Because you reveal what's inside the rind, right? Okay, so what does that mean? That means that the fruit itself is something that's revealed inside, okay? And if you look at these, they all have to do with the threshing floor, which was the revealing of the fruit inside, okay? Open the head, as in listen to the counsel, meaning what? Eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is listening to the counsel of the knowledge of good and evil, which was propagated by what? The hiss, not the serpent. The nakash isn't the word serpent, is the word hiss. Okay, let me jump out of this share screen and let's discuss what we've got going on here. First and foremost, where does a woman get her authority to negotiate business according to Torah? By what authority does she negotiate business according to Torah?
Her husband or father.
Her husband or father, because they can annul contracts, right? Okay, so I know there's probably some women out there, or perhaps even some men out there, who would immediately say, there's your proof that Torah is misogynistic and that a woman can't handle her own business. But instead, the way that you want to think about it is from the point of view of the daughters of Zelophehad, okay? In other words, the inheritance of the business falls to the firstborn, male or female. Meaning what? Meaning in the ancient times, if a woman was going to negotiate business, it was spending her father's money or spending her husband's money, okay? Because look at the Proverbs 31 wife, okay? I want you to think about this. There is right now on Zillow, I believe it's still there. I'm not going to go check, but I believe it's still there. And I think it's selling for $8 million a vineyard up the road from us. Okay. $8 million. So the Proverbs 31 wife does what? She goes and she considers a field. Okay, let's start there. What skills are necessary to know whether or not a field is correct as a terroir, as a sound place for grapes to grow? What type of knowledge is required, right? Now we're going to talk about negotiation, the purchase of the land, which I'm going to tell you right now, a true Hebrew in the time of Abraham knew how to haggle, okay? Knew how to get a good deal. So she's going to now broker a real estate deal. So she's either a real estate broker herself or there's another person involved. But either way, she considers a field and buys it. Now, in context of that process, we need to accept that a woman is not going to be the holder of the inheritance, but the son or the father is going to be the holder of the inheritance, or the husband and his son. So now she considers a field and buys it, means she is authorized by her husband to spend that money, right? But now she's going to make so much money that she actually opens a cottage industry and starts making textiles and trading them with merchants from afar, which means her stuff was rare and highly desirable. So in that sense, why can a husband annul a contract? Because it's his money. Why can a father annul a contract? Because it's his money. Not because they have some sort of special authority over the woman. However, the authority of the woman in a power of attorney to control his money is granted by her husband. Meaning, and this is important, that the only way in which a woman would have authority is if it was granted by her husband. Now, you take that authority that is granted or delegated or is jurisdictional to her husband, and she has autonomy and she has sovereignty to what? To control that which has been given. And along comes something else trying to give counsel. How do we know? Because it says, if you eat from the fruit, you will not surely die. But God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will know good and evil like God. That's advice. That's counsel. And what does Eve do? She listens to the serpent. She listens to the counsel. She listens to the hiss, and she eats the fruit. And then she gives to her husband, and he also eats, thus surrendering the authority that her husband had granted her over the garden to the serpent. Now, if she would have listened to her husband and not touched the tree, I know that he made an anti-Torah. I know he made don't touch it, which was not what Yahweh had said. They were to cultivate all the trees in the garden, but he was not to eat of it. But he said don't touch it. And so now she says, I can't touch it, right? But here's the part that's important. If she would have listened to Adam and made him Lord as Sarah did, the serpent wouldn't have had a voice. And that is what is the reason the rabbis believe that Sarah got honored, or that Sarah got honored by her death and her life and 127 years being mentioned. And why she was granted 7 more is because she did not listen to the serpent. Now, we could get into all kinds of things about, well, can we really prove that? No, we can't. Can we identify that that's the true reason why she gets the 127 years mentioned in Torah, and no other human being who is female in the whole of the Bible has their age mentioned? Rachel's Leah's servant, Sarah, and Deborah are the only 4 women mentioned in the Bible who died. Their death is mentioned. It was significant to say that they had lost somebody. Torah and the book of Judges are the only places where women are honored enough that their death is mentioned, as it was significant loss to the people of Israel, right? Or it was a significant loss to someone, Rachel being one of them. Okay, so, but only one is given the length of their years. Only one. Nobody knows how long Leah lived. Nobody knows how long, Rebecca lived. But we know how long Sarah lived. And I say that this parasha was designed to show us one single thing. Number one, that Abraham had plenty of women and plenty of children to acknowledge the fact that he had his promise, that he received his promise in his lifetime. After 100 years old, he's married to Keturah and has plenty of children. Gets to enjoy his life with Isaac until the day he dies. Right? But, and also gets to see the legacy of Ishmael, right? But here's the part that's important and relevant. And that is that Sarah gets special recognition for having never listened to the serpent by calling Abraham Lord her whole life. Not because he was some misogynistic jerk. I will definitely say Abraham did not treat Sarah the way a woman should be treated. And I would say that there is some problems in that whole marriage. We'll also say that it is very apparent that Abraham is not the one who had a problem with having kids, because at an old age, he's popping out kids. So Sarah's special, and this entire parasha acknowledges that she's special through one single mechanism: Rebecca. Rebecca takes the place of Sarah in wisdom, in the fact that Rebecca, we don't see it in this one, I don't believe, but Rebecca enters the tent of Sarah with Isaac. Okay? Isaac chooses to live in Sarah's tent. There's a lot to be said there. And we need to get into the discussion about Isaac. But I want to make very clear that this Torah portion, this is why, even though that I've got junk in my sinuses and everything else, I wanted to do this parasha, is because this parasha is special in so many ways. There's so many little teeny tiny tidbits of information that just will blow your mind. It is a very esoteric parasha. And so if anybody has any other comments they want to add, this is the time, because we're going to go ahead and take a break. And I'm going to get some lunch together, and then I will come back and we will continue. Okay, let me check YouTube, make sure that there isn't anybody there. Nothing there. Okay. So then we will go ahead and take a break, and then when we come back, we will discuss Isaac. For those of you who want to go ahead and move on for the day, Shabbat Shalom.